Welcome to Books Recapped. Howard Phillips Lovecraft. The Shadow Out of Time. Nathaniel Wingate Peaslee was a man who had experienced a strange amnesia in 1908, where he lost 5 years of his life. When he woke up from his amnesia, he found that he had been replaced by a secondary personality. He was unable to remember anything of the previous years, and he was confused and scared by this. He found out that his wife and children were repulsed by him, and he lost their custody. During the 5 years, he began to study psychology and traveled to various remote and desolate places, such as the Himalayas, the deserts of Arabia, the Arctic, and limestone caverns of Western Virginia. He was known for his abnormally fast assimilation of knowledge and his ability to influence the thoughts and actions of others. He also had ties to occultist groups and scholars suspected of connection with nameless bands of abhorrent elder world hierophants. After regaining his personality and waking from his amnesia, he was reluctant to reveal the details of his experiences, but was eventually compelled to write them down and give them to his son, a professor of psychology, in the hope that it would serve as a warning to others. He also hoped that by sharing his story, it would help him understand what happened to him during the 5 years he lost. There was a possibility that his experience was a hallucination, but it was so realistic that it was hard to believe that it was. After losing over 5 years of his memory, he struggled to readjust to normal life and was plagued by strange dreams and ideas. He began to think of time in odd ways and was haunted by strange impressions of the outcome of the World War. He shared these impressions with others but was met with varying responses, some of which made him uncomfortable. He became fixated on understanding his amnesia and researching the studies and travels of his alternate self during the years he was missing. He started studying other cases of amnesia and consulting with psychologists, historians, anthropologists, and mental specialists to gain a deeper understanding of his own experience. He found disturbing similarities between his own experience and accounts from ancient folklore, medical case histories, and standard histories. These accounts depicted a dream city, an ancient and strange place, with towering structures, dark cylindrical towers, and gardens filled with unfamiliar and terrifying vegetation. He also saw other cities, ruins, and constructions in his dreams. He saw skies that were always cloudy and moist, and occasionally, he saw the sun and the moon, which looked different than what he remembered. He also saw constellations that were almost beyond recognition, and the far horizon was always misty and indistinct, which led him to believe that he might be in the southern hemisphere, near the Tropic of Capricorn. He started having infrequent dreams of floating over the city and through the regions around it, where he saw interminable roads through forests of fearsome growths with mottled, fluted, and banded trunks, and past other cities as strange as the one that persistently haunted him. At first, he believed these dreams to be normal and accepted them as such, but over time the element of terror increased, and he felt the need to study other cases of amnesia and visions in order to understand his own experience. He discovered that his dreams were closely duplicated by other accounts and that they included horrible details and explanations. He also discovered that he had read forbidden books in his altered state and found strange markings in the books that were similar to the characters in his dreams. He pieced together the scattered records to try and understand his experiences and his connection to a secondary personality. As he delved deeper into his research, he learned of the Great Race, an advanced alien race that had mastered the art of mind projection. He discovered that captured minds were allowed to study their new environment and were given access to the libraries containing records of the planet's past and future. They were also permitted to meet and exchange thoughts with other captured minds from different time periods. The captured minds were urged to write about themselves in their respective periods, and these documents were filed in the Great Central Archives. When the displacing mind had learned what it wished, it would build an apparatus to reverse the process of projection and return to its own body in time, while the captured mind would return to its own body in the future. He also saw a glimpse of some unspied and unknown monsters spouting mountainous columns of foam into the vaporous sky, and he was taken under the ocean in a gigantic submarine vessel with searchlights, where he saw some living horrors of unimaginable magnitude. He later found out that his dreams were of a period around 150 million years ago, during the transition from the Paleozoic to the Mesozoic era, and that the creatures were of a type of organic beings that are not known to exist today. These creatures had a society with political and economic systems, and that the society was not much different from human societies. These creatures had a lifespan of around 4,000 years, and that they dispose of any defective individuals. Once in a while, a keen mind would escape death by forward projection in time. Nathaniel was deeply affected by what was hinted in the speech of post-human entities about the fate of mankind, but chose not to write it down. He learned that after mankind, there would be a mighty beetle civilization, whose members the cream of the great race would seize when the monstrous doom overtook the elder world. Later, as the Earth span closed, the transferred minds would migrate through time and space to another stopping place in the bodies of the bulbous vegetable entities of Mercury. However, there would be races after them, clinging pathetically to the cold planet, burrowing to its horror-filled core, before the utter end. One day, Nathaniel received a letter from a mining engineer in Western Australia, who had come across strange stone blocks in the desert with markings on them. Intrigued by this discovery and recognizing the similarities to his nightmares, Nathaniel assembled a team of experts and his son, and set out on a journey to investigate. After a long journey across the ocean, Nathaniel and his team arrived in the Australian desert and set up camp. They began excavations, carefully sifting through the sand and uncovering a vast amount of ancient stone blocks, many with carvings and designs that matched the ones from Nathaniel's nightmares. As Nathaniel's unease grew, he couldn't shake off the feeling that they were uncovering something that should have remained buried, something that was not meant for human eyes. Despite Nathaniel's misgivings, the team pressed on with their excavations. They uncovered more and more ancient stone blocks. Some of them were so large that it took several men to move them. They also found carvings and symbols that matched legends from ancient cultures, adding further weight to Nathaniel's theory that this was an ancient civilization that predates recorded history. As they dug deeper, they also discovered underground chambers and passageways, leading deeper into the earth. Nathaniel could feel the unease and fear growing among the team, but they pressed on, driven by their curiosity and the desire to uncover the truth. One day, they found a large chamber filled with strange and terrifying statues and carvings depicting grotesque and monstrous creatures. Nathaniel could feel the weight of the past bearing down on him, and he knew that they had uncovered something that should have remained buried. Nathaniel was uncertain about the reality of the events he was about to describe. He had an inexplicable urge to walk towards the northeast. He described that one night after a windy day, he retired early but could not sleep. Rising shortly before 11, and afflicted as usual with that strange feeling regarding the northeastward terrain, he set out on one of his typical nocturnal walks. Seeing and greeting only one person, an Australian miner named Tupper, as he left the camp. The moon, slightly past full, shone from a clear sky and drenched the ancient sands with a white, leprous radiance which seemed to Nathaniel to be somehow infinitely evil. There was no wind, and he walked rapidly across the pallid, secret guarding hillocks toward the northeast. As he walked, Nathaniel described that his mind was filled with vivid dreams and memories, which he struggled to separate from reality. When he encountered a large group of ancient stones, he realized that they were part of a vast, decorative structure that was eerily familiar to him from his dreams. He became increasingly disturbed by the uncanny similarities between his dreams and the reality of the stones, and began to suspect that his dreams may not be dreams at all, but memories of a previous life. As Nathaniel continued to explore the stones, he became more and more convinced that they were part of a pre-human structure that was built by the same beings that he had been dreaming about. He described that the patterns on the stones were closely related and that they were part of one vast decorative conception. He also mentioned that the feeling of familiarity and recognition of the structure was overwhelming, and it was hard for him to separate the dream from reality. As he continued to explore the pile of stones, Nathaniel began to piece together the layout of the structure and the designs that once stretched over the vast surfaces of the primal masonry. He described that the structure was once a cyclopean corridor 30 feet tall, paved with octagonal blocks and solidly vaulted overhead. He also mentioned that there would have been rooms opening off on the right, and at the farther end one of those monstrous, great-eyed monstrosities that he had seen in his dreams. Nathaniel was in a state of constant fear and confusion, unsure if what he was experiencing was real or a manifestation of his delirium. He was plagued by a fever, and everything appeared to be in a haze. As he continued his journey, he was driven by an unknown force to unlock something, and he raced through the corridors until he reached the lowest level, where he found a metal clamped trapdoor. He trembled with fear as he recalled the native legends of the place and the possibility of what could be lurking beneath. As he moved forward, he came across familiar walls and carvings that were blighted with decay and age. He had to climb over a massive pile of fallen vaulting and felt oppressed by a sense of unwanted smallness in relation to the monstrous masonry. He was disturbed by the human form he possessed in the structure built by much larger creatures. He continued to leap, plunge, and stagger through the abyss and eventually reached his destination, the central archives of the building, where he found familiar hieroglyphed metal shelf doors and symbol-covered pillars. He took out a book and studied the queerly pigmented, brush-drawn letters of the text, which he recognized as the language used by a captive mind he knew in his dreams. He also found other familiar features, such as the metal cases, the dust-covered heap, the familiar archway, and a familiar corridor. Despite his fear, he tiptoed through the dust-filled aisles until he found a row of familiar shelves. He climbed to reach the shelf and successfully opened it, taking a specific case that filled him with an inexplicable emotion. Nathaniel knew he had to leave the building with his prize and find out what was inside the case, knowing it would change his life and the world forever. He was initially fascinated by the book and its condition, and the curvilinear letters of the title held him in a hypnotized state. However, as he opened the book and read the contents, he was overcome with a feeling of terror and dread. He clenched his teeth to suppress any sound he might make and sank to the floor, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He considered the possibility that he might be dreaming, but decided to take the book with him to test its reality. He closed the book, put it in its container, and snapped the lid shut, then made his way back through the underground location, taking care to avoid making noise. He was filled with dread as he passed the possible prints in the dust, and even the sound of his own breathing made him tremble. He was preoccupied with thoughts of what might still be lurking in the depths, and the tales of the some natives that spoke of great winds and nameless subterranean ruins. He heard an eerie whistling sound and a strong wind that seemed to be following him as he made his way through a structure leading to the surface. He was exhausted and frightened, carrying a heavy metal case, and was hindered by the wind. He eventually reached a large cleft that he had to cross, but was overcome with fear and the thought of unknown entities lurking in the depths below. He finally made the leap, but was engulfed in a vortex of sound and darkness. Nathaniel described his experience, which he could only recall fragments of. He described a fall through incalculable leagues of viscous, sentient darkness, and a babble of noises utterly alien to all that we knew of the earth and its organic life. He experienced dormant, rudimentary senses that seemed to start into vitality within him, telling of pits and voids peopled by floating horrors and leading to sunless crags and oceans and teeming cities of windowless basalt towers upon which no light ever shone. He had visions of the cyclopean city of his dreams, not in ruins, but just as he had dreamed of it, in which he was in his conical, non-human body again and mingled with crowds of the great race and the captive minds who carried books up and down the lofty corridors and vast inclines. He experienced a dream of wind-pursued climbing and crawling, wriggling into a blaze of sardonic moonlight through a jumble of debris which slid and collapsed after him amidst a morbid hurricane. Then he woke up to find himself in the Australian desert. Not knowing how much of what he experienced was real, he was left questioning his sanity, and if the great race and the abyss he saw were real and not just a nightmare. Because back in the cave with trembling hands holding the book, he shone his torch on its pages, revealing secrets long hidden from the world. But as he glanced over the queerly pigmented letters, he realized with a shock that they were not the nameless hieroglyphs of a long-forgotten civilization. They were the very letters of his own English language, written in his own handwriting. Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to our channel. Pressing a like and commenting would help us greatly. You can also support us on Patreon, link in the description. See you soon on Books Recapped.